'Tis the season of gifting and halls to deck, and the Who's and Who Newville were in love with new tech. Where can we find Sonos and Samsung and Nintendo, they shouted. Would they find it in one place? This they questioned and doubted. When suddenly a Who yelled, Walmart's the place to start! And each Who added headphones, TVs, and games to their carts. With Walmart, their shopping was done in a flurry. They cried out, who knew? And ordered their gifts in a hurry. Shop the latest tech gifts in the Walmart app.
My parents made every Christmas magical, and even though we're miles apart, I still want them to feel loved and remembered during the holidays. That's why I'm sending something beautiful from 1-800-Flowers. Their Christmas bestsellers are timeless, heartfelt, and just what they'll love. For a limited time, you can get up to 40% off Christmas bestsellers at 1-800-Flowers.com/SXM. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/SXM to save up to 40% on Christmas bestsellers. Shop now.
To get the Crime Writers on After Show right now, go to patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, hard-hitting investigations, compelling profiles, and average people unable to convince authorities they're wrong. There was something for everyone in our top 10 lists. We'll reveal the best podcasts we reviewed in 2025. Joining me to get that done is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Also with us, private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of The Final Curtain, Lara Bricker. Hi, Lara.
Hey, Rebecca.
And finally, our captain of all things cynical, author of the City Trilogy, host of Strange Arrivals, and the newly emigrated to Spain, Toby Ball. Hi, Toby.
Buenas, Rebecca.
So glad you have internet so you can join us. Kevin?
Yes.
What's coming up on Thursday's show?
Oh, well, we are going to talk about the best television of 2025, the best things that we saw. TVs, movies, documentaries, and reviewed, yes.
I just want to say, we know that there are other podcasts and other TV shows in the world, but we talk about the ones that we've reviewed. So just to be clear.
That would only be fair.
All right, Kevin, should we just get going into this thing?
I think that we should. We're ready.
All right.
I'm saying it's all killer, no filler.
All right, let's do it. 2025 was a solid year for podcasts. There were multiple investigative series, retrospectives on the history you thought you knew, and even some lighthearted fare that was quirky and entertaining. But which titles truly stood out? We'll hear from the crime writers as we share our top 10 podcasts that we reviewed in 2025. Before we begin, much thanks to Linnea Motter for managing the list of reviews in the Crime Writers On website for so many years. And cheers to Kevin for taking up that duty. Every up or down is there at crimewriterson.com. Thank you, Kevin.
A couple of sideways, too, yeah.
You can also find our combined weighted top 10 list of the best podcasts we reviewed this year in the show notes and on crimewriterson.com/reviews. And just one more note, you won't hear all four of us weigh in on every number that we list because we have overlap on the list. So you'll just hear us weigh in, but you will get all of our picks. All right, let's get to it. Let's unveil the best podcast in 2025 by revealing our lists. Toby, let's start with you. What's your number 10 pick?
My number 10 pick is Lords of Death.
We didn't talk about Mick and Tim for over a decade. During that time, I tried to bury it away too, but the unanswered questions about what happened have always stuck with me.
So we reviewed this a while ago, and I had to kind of go back, and I just remembered that I liked it. It takes place during the Satanic Panic era and follows Thrasher Banks as he investigates whether a serial killer was active in Ohio in the 1990s. But the subtext that's running through the whole thing and sort of why I think I liked it so much is Banks' connection to the story. He was a child who was in the sphere of the suspects in this case. So I thought it was really successful. I kind of like these things where, and I think Murder on Middle Beach is probably the prime example of people in their early adulthood looking back at things that happened around them when they were children and sort of processing that while at the same time kind of telling the story of that stuff. It can be done pretty poorly, but I remember with Lords of Death, when it was done, I was like, wow, he did a really nice job with that. And the story is very compelling as well. It's tough to pull off. So that was the reason why it's my number 10.
Kevin,
Yeah.
you also have a number 10. What is it?
My number 10 pick is The Preventionist.
They wanted to make sure the baby was okay, so they sent him to the ER.
We saved his life that night. But upon arriving at Lehigh Valley Hospital, the diagnosis quickly became something so different, something nobody could have ever prepared me for.
So this, I'll just say it is kind of a controversial podcast. It's from Serial Productions. It looks primarily at one hospital's child abuse specialist who overdiagnosed cases of abuse where sometimes there were none and pushed authorities to take action when they otherwise wouldn't. So it's basically a wrongful conviction podcast, just like any other one, but instead of overzealous cops, it's an overzealous doctor. It's not perfect. The last episode focused on a woman who's trying to get her children back. That could have been better, but The Preventionist really shines a light on an issue that really hasn't been covered in true crime before. And so that's why it made my top 10 list.
Lara, this is number 3 on your list. Why did you like it?
I like this one because we have had a lot of focus on the child welfare system here in New Hampshire where we live. We've had a lot of issues. We had a young girl missing for a few years before they even realized it, who had been murdered. And so I liked this podcast because it brought very good reporting to this issue with regard to these child protection pediatricians who were doing these exams. And it was rage-inducing, and they had really good sourcing.
All right, let's move on to our number 9 picks. Toby, we're going to go to you again. What was your number 9 pick that we reviewed in 2025?
Yeah, my number 9 pick was Dirtbag Climber.
Who was Jesse James?
It was clear that this person lived a deliberately private life.
Well, he had a lot of secrets.
He's a puzzle. He really is.
So this was a sort of wild get a load of this guy story. It centers around this guy, Andrew Britt Greenbaum, who is kind of cutting edge on all this shit that makes your life like slightly less pleasant. He was a virulent neo-Nazi, which probably makes your life very less pleasant. A rock climber, but he's found dead in the Canadian woods under a different name. And there seemed to be a lot of people who potentially could have murdered him. He's interesting. He's sort of a visionary in kind of screwing with people, especially through internet and email. So he was like early in on like spam emails. He, of course, got into crypto, as you could imagine. He also was this neo-Nazi who like did his grooming, so he looked as much like Hitler as he possibly could. So there's a lot going on with this guy. The story was crazy enough to keep it entertaining. It was well paced. It was the right length. It's, you know, it's a look at an extreme version of a type of person that you kind of run into from time to time. So anyway, that was why I liked it.
Yeah, this podcast is my number 7. I liked it for all the same reasons, Toby. And I will just add, it sounded fantastic. It was beautifully made. And this wasn't a case of, hey, let's explore this one person. And it turns out they're really freaking boring. Interesting to the host, but boring to everybody else. This is kind of the opposite of that. Like, he ended up being much more interesting than I thought he would be. And I liked that they sort of covered all the different places that he was. And it just sort of reminded me of other scummy people that I may have encountered in my real life, to an extreme example. So yeah, Dirtbag Climber is pretty great. That's why it's my number 7. So we're up to number 8. Lara Bricker, tell us, what was number 8 on your list?
Number 8 on my list was Uncover Sea of Lies.
I think it was accepting that we were never going to find out the true circumstances of what had happened at that point. Okay, he'd come off a boat. That was obvious. He'd drowned. That was reality. How are we ever going to find out what happened?
This was a podcast from the CBC, host Sam Mullins, and I loved this. It had all the things I like. Someone with a double life, twists and turns, a story that's told not necessarily chronologically, but in an order that made you want to keep listening to the next episode. It had scenes in Canada, scenes overseas, interesting people. The host was really fun to listen to. This was not the same old podcast. So this was a story. It unfolds in 1996. Fishermen pull a body of a man out of the English Channel. He's got a Rolex watch with an inscription. They think it's one person. Surprise! It's not that person. They have some really interesting people in here, including at one point there was a woman that was dating one of these fellows, and she was a great voice. This was just one of those things that ticks all my boxes of people, you know, leading a double life, but also following the thread to connect all of those lives in a very entertaining way.
Toby, this was your number 5.
Yeah, I like this a lot. I really like Sam Mullins. I liked it for a lot of the reasons Lara did. It's sort of a twisty story. You spend a lot of the time sort of like off balance, trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Picked a good story and told it very well.
So my number 8 is Death County, PA.
Law enforcement actually has a more colorful name for DCP. They call it the county toilet. And inmates knew DCP wasn't just dirty and in disrepair. It could also be deadly.
So I really like this podcast. To me, it was kind of a classic In the Dark season 2-ish kind of show, insofar as that it had really solid reporting. This is a partnership with Penn Live, which is a great publication. This is about a county prison. It begins with the story of this healthy man who was 29, who went to this prison and then was dead in 2 weeks. And it turns out he's not the only one. There's lots of deaths in this prison. You know, a guy got out, his cousin went in, and then his cousin ended up dying. There's like pretty much a body almost every episode. What I also love about this podcast is that it has a villain that you love to hate. This guy named Graham Hetrick, who was this like televangelist coroner type. He had like a TV show and he claimed to, quote, speak for the dead. Like he thinks he's in a Patricia Cornwell novel or something. And, you know, there's lots of people in power. There's lots of people doing things they shouldn't be doing. And Josh Vaughn, who reported this, clearly this is the product of years and years of reporting. And I love a good journalism podcast. So yeah, this one is my number 8. Kevin, this is your number 9.
Yeah, I have this at number 9. I think that the reporting is great. This is an example of a podcast that the news gathering wasn't done for it to be a podcast. This certainly has the feel of something where they repurposed a bunch of other reporting, but it was still done very well. And you're right. I also love to hate that coroner.
Hetrick.
You know, when you can kind of expose somebody as a bullshit artist, and, you know, that's fantastic. But anyway, it's, we found, and there's a couple of other podcasts on our list that are like this, that when you have seasoned journalists that are excellent at journalism, it makes for a better journalism podcast instead of being like a podcaster throwing themselves into some kind of half-assed investigation. And so that's why Death County, PA made my list.
Moving up the ladder to the number 7 pick, Lara Bricker. What podcast was number 7 on your list?
My number 7 pick was Breakdown 3 Days in May.
She picked our daughter up, handed her to me. I was holding our daughter. And for a little bit, she says, hey, what's that on her forehead? I said, what are you talking about?
There's a lot of reasons I like this podcast. This was the Bill Rankin swan song, the last season of Breakdown that he took part in. And, you know, Breakdown is a podcast that we have listened to since the beginning. And I love it because it is a newspaper very effectively using somebody that is a court insider, longtime reporter, to bring stories to you from inside the criminal justice system. It's incredibly well sourced. And it took something in this case, which was a baby death case, that people tend to immediately jump to one side or the other when they hear a baby death, and humanized it and told both sides in a way that you really could see this whole story for what it was. So this was the story of two parents, Ashley and Albert. They met in the military. They put their newborn to bed for the first time. Hours later, they go to the hospital after they found a bump on their baby's forehead. When the baby died, the police immediately are like, yep, it's the parents. We're going to charge them. And this was just extremely well reported because we heard from those parents. We heard what they went through. And there was a finale to this. There was a resolution to this. So for me, Breakdown, that podcast is always sort of a standard bearer when I look at newspapers going into the podcast world. And this season of Breakdown really did not disappoint. It was very well done.
All right, next I'm going to reveal my number 6 podcast of the year. Couple things make my pick unusual. One is that I did not get a chance to review it on this actual podcast. I was out that week, but I liked it so much I wanted to add it to my list. Another thing that makes it unusual, it's one of only 3 podcasts that ended up on all 4 of our lists. And that is Not a Very Good Murderer.
Whether she could be a credible source in an investigative story or not, I realized there is a lot to learn from the times and alleged, often unsolved crimes of Cece Doan.
I must be the worst person to kill anybody.
So I love this show. Ronan Farrow, obviously, I'm a huge fan of his work. I just think his voice for podcasting is excellent. I think his writing is excellent, translates really, really well to audio. And I think that this podcast, which originally released on Audible and then on the feed, is kind of a must listen that maybe got missed a little bit this year because it was on Audible initially. It's an example of what happens when you take one of the best reporters working and kind of have them put their eye on, for all intents and purposes, just a person, like a person in the world, not like a politician, not like a movie producer, just like a person in the world. And this was Celia Doan. She's this high society socialite who's been a person of interest for decades in several attempted murder plots against her husband, but she's never been arrested. And she is a character, like a super duper character. And she fully participated in the telling of this story in a way that led Ronan down all these paths. And it ended up being about much more than just these suspected attempted murders. So this is one of those shows that it's about the story, but it's also about journalism. It's about the difficulty of investigating and verifying stories. I love that, especially in an era of disinformation. And it's all about a community, too, that keeps secrets, people who want to talk and don't. And I love podcasts that show journalism. So, Lara, this was number 5 on your list.
Yeah, I loved Cece's voice. I thought she was I would just sit there and listen to Ronan and Cece talking all day. It was fascinating to hear her life story. It almost felt like an audiobook because of the level of reporting and the level of detail and the way that the story was told. And it was just, again, like Ronan Farrow, he's a master of that type of storytelling, but also he's a master of, and I hate to say it, like infiltrating that world because he's part of that world. And so these people want to talk to him. And I found this just mesmerizing to listen to. So that's why it was on my list.
Toby, this was number 6 for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how it came about, but it seemed as though it was something where he kind of ran into this person in pursuit of a different story and was like, oh man, this is something I need to like circle back on. So it kind of shows that like top reporters, very smart guys and gals, you know, even like their sort of minor projects can be so compelling and revealing that it doesn't have to be like he just breaks these incredible stories again and again and again. And this isn't breaking an incredible story. It's just finding this very, very interesting person who I think, you know, kind of in some ways speaks to the moment. And I think he was able to identify that and sort of turn it into this really compelling podcast.
And this was number 6 on my list. Ronan Farrow, the knock on him is that a lot of this stuff ends up kind of being about him. He certainly enjoys throwing himself into the story because he does it very well. And here he starts down the road of, kind of investigating a mystery and reveals something completely different. A woman that is more than just a character. It ends up telling larger things about self-delusion and families and trauma and the lies that get told to us that we believe and the ones that we tell ourselves. And so for all of those reasons, it made for a really interesting tale to go along. You're right. We definitely hear all of the journalism, all of these phone calls where he's just chatting her up. There are probably so many hours of his life that he would like to have back from talking to Cece, who's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, or whatever she would say all the time. And just to find out whether or not she is actually a very good murderer. Now, you can be a very good friend to the show if you join us on Patreon.
Oh, we're in the business section. Nice job, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, the best business section of the year is the one that we do at the end of the year. If you join us on Patreon at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia, I think Ronan Farrow owes us $5 after all of that. You can get the Crime Writers on after show. Hey, what we're going to talk about, we're going to catch up a little bit with Toby now that he has landed in Spain and is, in base camp number 1. We'll be talking more about that with him later on, but we are also going to talk about the worst damn thing that we reviewed in 2025.
All right.
We each got a big stinker, and we're going to talk about that. Other things you can get are Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast. The latest discussion is By the Fire We Carry, a very interesting look at Native American issues in Oklahoma. And Toby had a really great discussion. Other podcasts include Married with Podcast, our advice podcast, Rebecca's new podcast with Mel Barrett. It's weekly. It's called Something's Off. And it's following now a wild murder trial of Brian Walsh.
Yep.
And Lara Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast. In the latest episode, Lara goes Contra dancing. If you don't know what it is, you definitely got to join. If you join us at the Let's Do What We Do level, you get episodes early and ad-free. You already know what our number one pick is, and you'll be getting our number one pick for TV early as well. And if you join at the Deep Diver level, you get to be an official sponsor of Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast. When you join, you're getting at least 20 episodes, additional episodes a month from all of us. And that's a great way to keep this show going in 2026 is to join us on Patreon.
All right, Kevin, does thus end your rapid fire business section?
Thus ends the business section.
So, Kevin, what's up next on your best of list?
I'm jumping directly to number one.
Oh.
The number one rated gift for the holidays is Aura Frames.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what Wirecutter says. You love Wirecutter.
I do.
And you love our Aura Frame. It's the hidden gem that becomes the favorite gift long after the wrapping paper is gone.
Yep.
So it's a digital picture frame, works with your phone. You got all those beautiful pictures. Shoot them right to your digital frame, either in your house, somebody else's house.
Yep.
Pass them along. That's what we do. All the kids in the family are connected to our Aura Frame. And by the way, we gave one away.
Yes.
We haven't been invited yet to contribute to that.
Yeah, we need to be invited to contribute to that because I get some pictures to send that kid.
Yeah, and if you are giving an Aura Frame for the holidays, you can personalize it with a custom message that will appear on the frame the first time you turn it on. It's very thoughtful.
For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver mat frames, named number one by Wirecutter by using promo code CRIMEWRITERS.
Crime Writers.
At checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code CRIMEWRITERS.
Crime Writers.
This deal is exclusive to listeners and frames sell out fast, so order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.
On December 16th, ID presents a new documentary event.
My dad disappeared off the face of the earth.
Uncover a 56-year-old mystery.
I asked Mike to come to the psychic with me.
The psychic was murder. He is in the basement.
And dig up the truth.
We were digging for months. There was nothing. All of a sudden, I hit something with the shovel. The police need to see this.
I kept that a secret for a long time.
The Secrets We Bury, an ID documentary event, December 16th at 9 on ID.
20th Century Studios presents the upcoming comedy, Ella McKay, from Academy Award-winning writer-director James L. Brooks. Emma Mackey plays Ella McKay, an idealistic young woman who juggles her family and work life in a story about the people you love and how to survive them. Featuring an all-star cast, including Emma Mackey, Jamie Lee Curtis, Jack Loudon, Kumail Nanjiani, Iowa Debris, Julie Kavner, with Albert Brooks and Woody Harrelson. Ella McKay, only in theaters Friday.
Let's resume our list of the best podcasts we reviewed in 2025. We're now at number 5. Kevin, which podcast made your list at 5?
Number 5 on my list is The Kaepernick Affair.
So the most correct answer is you had friends from all groups, but you're saying that you didn't belong to any one group in particular.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
All right. Because sometimes, Hassan, it's hard to get you to answer yes or no.
So this podcast covers the investigation into a 1980 bombing of a synagogue in Paris by a Palestinian militant group. And so decades later, French authorities accused a sociology professor who is living in Canada of being involved because he has this very common name. And they want him extradited to France to stand trial. And the Canadians aren't terribly sure that this guy did it. And so there's a fight to extradite him. This podcast has got great tape of the host interviewing Hassan Diab, who's just kind of vague enough to leave you wondering whether or not he actually was a terrorist or whether he's just a scapegoat in a very failed and flawed investigation. So a lot of great reporting, kind of a chin scratcher, and it's sort of like left off at a critical moment in Canadian politics. And I would love to see an updated episode because it was kind of like, oh no, this liberal government is going to change and the guy who's going to be the new prime minister is going to throw Diab out of the country and throw him back to France. And that didn't happen there. So I'm curious to see where this story is now. It's called The Kaepernick Affair.
Moving on to our final 4. Lara Bricker, what is your pick for number 4 in our best podcast of the year list?
Number 4 in my pick this year is the Retrievals Season 2.
It was just all of a sudden, it felt like my vagina was just being shredded. I don't know. It literally felt like like somebody had like a steel toe boot and was just kicking around in there.
Oh, jeez.
This is one of those, I think of Rebecca when I think of this podcast because we're always minimizing women's pain. This is a rage-inducing podcast. It's from the Serial folks. Set in a Chicago hospital, a labor and delivery nurse is prepared to give birth to a set of twins. During her C-section, her epidural never kicks in. She's feeling the pain of the entire procedure. She's crying out. Nobody's listening. They're downplaying. They're gaslighting her. And this forces somebody within the circle to sort of look at this. Anyway, this is extremely well reported. This was very well sourced. There are sources in here, people that you would not expect to hear from on both sides of this. There's one point where they actually go inside a medical conference, and I'm like, I cannot believe these doctors and these people participated. It was compelling. It was rage-inducing, and I really hope it leads to change in the medical community because I had a C-section. And when I listened to this, I was like, if I had pain, I mean, they were so afraid of me when I went in the hospital anyway, because I was bitching about pain. But if I had pain like this, somebody would have heard about it. So I hope this podcast leads to some change. And that is why it is on my list as number 4.
And it's number 7 on my list, Lara. I agree with you that it was really enlightening. Season 1 of the Retrievals was great. I mean, we don't technically have a retrieval here, but we do have this recurring theme about authority figures who will not believe the average person here. We see that in a couple of different podcasts and a couple of different series. And in this case, you're right. It's a terrifying moment to think about. You're there with your gut splayed open trying to have a baby and you can feel everything. I don't mean to make it funny here. It's just so mind-bending. It does what podcasts do best, where it shines light on an issue that more people need to hear about it. You know who needs to hear about it? Anesthesiologists. And it certainly brings us, we are able to see what ends up happening when it's brought up among the professionals, the honesty they have with each other, the fear that they have about doing the wrong thing, and the realization that maybe in some cases they were hurting and not helping. So it really was something that I thought everybody needed to hear. It was so well done.
Yeah, this is my number 5. There is, for me, one flaw with the podcast in the framing, but I'm putting that aside because I think about this podcast all the time, and that means it deserves to be on this list, absolutely. One of the things, first of all, good on you guys for keeping the Retrievals and making that the brand of the show. Keep going. This is different than season 1 because season 1 was about a drug-diverting nurse and then the doctors who didn't believe these women who actually weren't getting pain medication. And this is about people who are getting what they're supposed to be getting, and it's not working and nobody believes them. And that to me is so much scarier. It really is. It's so much scarier, this idea that something like 8% of women go through this. I also love the insideriness of the hospital, the sort of how things work, even going to medical conferences to keep up your credits. Like they just explore sort of like the internal lives and minds of people in the medical profession. Like we learned, for instance, that when a nurse is facing this, that it's like, that's one of our own. And it's just interesting to get a bite of that culture.
And her friend will come in and take photographs of her labor and delivery.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So despite the framing flaw, I do have to give the Retrievals season 2 a spot on my list at number 5. All right. Now it's time for the big kahunas, our shows that made our top 3. Toby Ball, which podcast did you say is the number 3 podcast we reviewed in 2025?
My number 3 is Final Thoughts, Jerry Springer.
I mean, what is the purpose of your show?
The purpose? I have said this so many times publicly. I think it's a silly, crazy, outrageous show. I think it's chewing gum. I think the world will be fine with it. The world will be fine without it.
You know, Jerry Springer is a pretty interesting cultural figure. He went from being a liberal local politician to a local TV anchor to the host of the very, very trashy Jerry Springer Show. It's a very crazy life arc, and it gets the Leon Neyfakh treatment. I think I probably picked the Leon Neyfakh in every single one of these top 10. So, yeah, anyway, I'm sorry to be predictable, but he actually gets my sweet spot in terms of my interests and the way things sound. I knew the general beats of the story, but, you know, I didn't really understand, I guess, Springer's relationship to his own show. It was really interesting to hear that and how he kind of, I guess, sort of lost control of it a little bit and tried to stay aloof. And then also, I think towards the end of his sort of working career, like realizing the corner he'd painted himself into with the Jerry Springer show, and that, you know, it seemed as though his really ambitions were political, and that just wasn't going to work after all of this. So in some ways, it's sort of a sad and frustrating story. Anyway, you know, it's the usual Leon Neyfakh, very well researched, interesting interviews. The sound is great. That's why it was my number 3.
And it's number 4 for me, Toby. You make a predictable Leon Neyfakh podcast pick sound like a bad thing.
Yeah, it's good.
It's absolutely predictable. It's absolutely reliable. I'm thinking of all the Leon Neyfakh podcasts we've listened to, and I think the worst thing we could say is that the attention deficit one was good.
It was pretty good.
It was pretty good. And that's the worst. He's always, I don't know how he does it. Has he made a bad podcast? Is he capable of doing that?
He's a machine.
I probably just jinxed him. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I thought what was great about, I mean, this is not an obvious topic for a Leon Neyfakh podcast, but what we do here is we have a re-examination of a controversial figure, and we see how he became trapped in his own gilded cage. And it made him way more sympathetic than I think he probably deserved. Yeah, do we hear about the time that we had the guest that fucks a horse? Yeah, sure.
I forgot about that.
There. How can you not? Did you learn that Jerry Springer was in a political scandal because he went to a prostitute and paid with a check? Yeah, I mean, like, all of these are fantastic stories, but it's written so well, it's delivered so well. The final thought is that you got to listen to it.
Yeah, this was number 9 on my list. I'm just going to echo everything you guys said and not repeat, but there's 2 other things I really liked about this podcast. One is that it was a look at the media landscape and how it was forever changed by the Jerry Springer show. And the second one is Jerry's own. He's not, obviously, he passed away, but his sort of focuses a little bit on his relationship with the show and his ability to say about himself, I'm separating the art from the artist, which is such an interesting concept and something I think about all the time, especially as a critic who sometimes says things that I would never say to somebody's face on this podcast when they make something crappy. Is that me? Yeah, it's me. Do I stand by it? 100%. Not the same as Jerry Springer, but a very interesting thing to hear him talk about. So, Kevin, what ended up on number 3 on your list?
Well, number 3 for me was Stakeknife.
I see a rat standing in the dock. An informer who's doing his utmost to save his own skin and doesn't give a damn about the damage he's done to his own people.
So this is the story of the IRA's most brutal double agent, Freddie Scappaticci. His job was to root out and eliminate IRA informants, but he himself was the British Army's most valuable informant, codenamed Stakeknife. So this is a podcast from BBC Sounds, and it examines Scappaticci's dirty work and whether British authorities are responsible for allowing Stakeknife to continue unchecked as an enforcer and an executioner while he's on the payroll. Look, it's a great dive into both history and present day. We listened to this not long after Say Nothing, that miniseries, which we all loved. And there are so many great moments in this podcast, a real tour de force of the history of the Troubles. It had an exceptional episode in which the host takes the brother of an assassinated informant to the roadside dump site for the first time. Years and years later, we hear him praying in Irish and getting emotional, and it just was fantastic. The knock that you guys had, and I can't disagree, it's long, it's very thorough. We've had things that were dense. I didn't find it dense, but I did find it thorough. It's great, and it's called Stakeknife.
Yeah, this is number 4 on my list too, Kevin. I agree with you. This is a great story about state-sponsored murder, essentially. And this is something that obviously we've heard about the IRA and the authorities in Ireland and other media. But anything that is state-sponsored and murder is something that we should be looking at, thinking about. But the fact that it goes into so much detail about, all the backstory, I remember thinking at the time that it was thick, but I still think about the story a lot. So that's why it ended up on my number 4. Toby, this was your number 8.
Yeah, I really like this. Again, the Troubles are such an interesting time. That Patrick Radden Keefe's book, Say Nothing, then the show, Say Nothing, and then this podcast. And I think there's also this sort of moral question about the British letting him basically root out other informants and have them murdered, and just kind of letting that happen in order just to protect himself and him being an informant. And I think it's this kind of moral choice or immoral choice, I guess, that was made again and again and again in different situations. But this manages just to really make it very visceral. This could have very easily been higher on my list, but I thought it was really good.
Okay, we are at number 2 on the best podcast we reviewed of 2025. So, Lara Bricker, what made The Hollowed number 2 on your list?
I went with what were the most rage-inducing podcasts that stuck with me in my top 1 and 2. So my number 2 podcast was Liberty Lost.
I was being punished and being told I wasn't worthy of getting to be the one who had him, be his mother.
And this couple, waiting for them at the end of the aisle, they've been chosen to be the baby's parents, whether Abby and Nathan like it or not.
This was a podcast that fueled me as I was getting ready for one of my 5Ks. This is the other side.
5Ks.
Believe me, I walk
Sorry,
my
Lara.
5Ks. No, I walk them. Don't worry. I don't run. I run a little bit, but no, I don't run the whole thing. But no, it was just, I was so enraged listening to this podcast. It centers on an issue that is very current in our country and our climate. We hear from a lot of pro-life supporters, and we hear from a lot of those folks. Well, this was the other side to pro-life, which is women that did not want to have an abortion and were forced to give their children up for adoption through the maternity home run by Liberty University. Cue angry thunderbolts coming out of my head right now. I was crazed over this. So Abby is a teenager we hear from. She's promised free medical care, college tuition, counseling, and they force her to give her baby up. She's cut off from everybody. She's isolated. It's like she's in some sort of Handmaid's Tale, modern day maternity home. And this godparent home, which by the way is still in operation, they're like, no, it's not an option to keep your baby. I did not know about this. I did some reading on it afterwards. The sourcing on this, the fact that they had parents on both sides, they had people that had worked there that left. It was really well done. This is our post Roe v. Wade world, and everybody needs to know about this. So this is why this was my number 2 podcast.
This was my number 10 podcast, but as you're talking about it, I'm like, is that right? Should it have been higher? I loved this podcast. I love anything that looks at Liberty University and the Falwells. Those people are awful, and that place is a fake-ass college. Last week, we were listening to a podcast where the person who had died in it had been a student at Liberty, and I just yelled out. I was like, that's a fake-ass college. It's horrible. It's a horrible, horrible place that tries to indoctrinate the next generation of Madison Cawthorns. That literally, that's what they are trying to do. And the idea that they think white Christian parents are the only people who should be allowed to be parents is something that we need to think about all the time. That is what is at the center of the modern anti-abortion movement, is that the only people who should be parents, all these babies should be going to white Christian parents. Like, that is what is at the center of it. Sure, there are a few people who have real moral religious issues with it, and I'm putting them over here because, you know, there's well-meaning people who are also on that side of this issue. But I believe that this podcast is incredibly important. It made me super angry. And one thing I loved about it, it does not treat any of the women in it who had been girls at the time with any kind of shame. It didn't look at their lives and say, oh, poor her. It was just like so much dignity, super great storytelling, and great hosting by TJ Raphael. Toby, what is number 2 on your list?
Number 2 on my list is Scam Factory.
What? Let them go? He told me that. Do you think that you are so powerful that you can get these people out? You are absolutely wrong. You don't play with me.
So this was the story of a family and then also some other people who get pulled into a call center that is run in the jungles of Myanmar. This is not Telemarketers 2. This is a completely different thing, but they are telemarketers. But you know, at least the way in which people, you know, and these are mostly people in Southeast Asia, I think, get pulled into the scam, the conditions they work under, the difficulty they have in getting out of it. I thought it was really interesting. And I thought, it tells this like sort of broader story, which is, they're kind of slaves. And so, they're getting paid, but they're not getting paid much. The punishments can run to the physical. They're not really allowed to leave. And they're basically just calling people over and over and over again for these different products. These are the calls you get, spam calls on your phone. They have really good access to the interviews they have with these people who are actually involved in it, including this woman who basically felt responsible for getting her brother involved in it. And then they're like, well, he can get out if you can get some other people to take his place. So she finds it actually incredibly easy to get people to take his place and becomes kind of a conduit for more people to go over there. You hear from one of those people. So it's, in addition to this, there's also these really sort of suspenseful and harrowing situations when people are trying to get out and it's just not clear what's going on. So there was just a lot going on here. I thought it was super interesting. It's unusual. It's not a part of the world that we listen to a lot of podcasts about. So anyway, number 2.
That podcast, by the way, hurt Kevin's feelings because he realized all those recruiters texting him for jobs were not real.
Oh, man, I get so many now.
I think of that podcast every time I get a spam call or one of those texts. And I always feel like this poor person, I feel for them, but I'm not answering it. And I'm reporting it as spam.
It's number 9 on your list.
Yeah, no, it was. And that's why I think that this was just, again, I think of this podcast all the time. How many of us get these messages all the time? And I'm like, what is the story behind this? And thinking about what these people went through in this story that we heard to get out of this place was insane. But also like that cheat sheet they had of all the ways that they were supposed to question you and push through to make the deal and get to the next level, that it was like traded around as like a commodity in that scam world. So I thought this was just a very enlightening, not something we've heard before. And again, something that I learned something from and I think about all the time.
Hey, everybody, it's Rob Lowe here. If you haven't heard, I have a podcast that's called Literally with Rob Lowe. And basically, it's conversations I've had that really make you feel like you're pulling up a chair at an intimate dinner between myself and people that I admire, like Aaron Sorkin or Tiffany Haddish, Demi Moore, Chris Pratt, Michael J. Fox. There are new episodes out every Thursday. So subscribe, please, and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Planning a trip this year? Travel smarter and connect deeper by learning the local language with Rosetta Stone. With over 30 years of experience, Rosetta Stone's immersive, intuitive method helps you live the language, not just memorize it. Choose from over 25 languages, including Spanish, French, Japanese, and more. Their true accent speech recognition technology gives real-time feedback to help perfect your pronunciation. No translations, just natural learning that builds from words to phrases to full conversations. Whether you have 5 minutes or an hour, you can learn anytime on desktop or mobile. Get a lifetime membership and unlock all 25 languages. Learn as much as you want, whenever you want. Rosetta Stone. Learn confidently. Connect authentically. Don't wait. Unlock your language learning potential now. Listeners can grab Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership for 50% off. That's unlimited access to 25 language courses for life. Visit rosettastone.com/pod50 to get started and claim your 50% off today. Don't miss out. Go to rosettastone.com/pod50 and start learning today.
Is it just me, or has watching TV gotten way too complicated? There's a million different services and just too many bills to keep track of. Thankfully, there's Philo, a better way to TV. For as low as $33 a month, I get the channels I love. MTV, BET, Food Network, you name it. Plus, everything that AMC Plus has to offer. And guess what? They've added access to HBO Max Basic with Ads Plan and Discovery Plus, so I can enjoy all the best TV with one subscription. There are no contracts, no surprise fees, just one low price. And their DVR is awesome too. I can save everything I love on Philo for up to a year and skip the ads when I rewatch them. A total game changer. I signed up directly at philo.tv. That's philo.tv, so I could lock in the best price around. Philo's the easiest decision I've ever made. Now the hard one is trying to decide what to binge next.
Now let's do what we do. We have reached the top of our lists. Let's reveal what we think the number one podcast we reviewed in 2025 is. Lara Bricker, What podcast did you list as your number one?
The podcast that I listed for my number one this year is Spotlight Snitch City.
You motherfuckers don't rat on each other if it's not good enough for you. It ain't good enough for my clients. So don't start telling my client what the hell he or she should do. They're not going to do what you don't do. Now shut the fuck up and leave me alone.
This was a podcast from the Spotlight team at the Boston Globe. And this hit everything that I want in a podcast. It's investigative journalism from a very established team, the Spotlight team. This is the team that exposed the Catholic clergy sex abuse scandal. There's movies made about them. We know that they have solid reporting chops. And it's set in New England. It's set in New Bedford. And this is about the war on drugs and how police have been set up to use confidential informants, CIs, to take down drug dealers, and how they literally take advantage of those CIs, how they have sex with their CIs, how they use the CIs against each other, how they protect drug dealers, how the police are breaking the law. This is the kind of story that we have not heard before. I loved it. It was very rage-inducing for me as somebody that works in the criminal justice system as a defense investigator, and hearing about how these CIs are treated, but also hearing that the police are being called out on this. This is not okay. Just because these are addicts that have likely become dealers doesn't mean you have the right to take advantage of them like this. So I actually went back and re-listened to this, which is very rare for me. And I feel like what I liked about this, it gave a voice to people that weren't normally given a voice in a way that was done just with extremely thorough, thoughtful reporting. And I loved this podcast.
Yeah, this is number two on my list, Lara. I agree with you completely. One thing also that it was concurrently an active investigation by the Spotlight team for the paper, and they were focusing on the police chief in that town and putting real pressure on them. Like I said, with Death County, PA, when you have a legit journalist, 5-star, completely competent, not going to mess this up, that makes for a great podcast. And everything that the Boston Globe has done as a podcast that we've listened to has been fantastic. And just like with Death County, PA, when you've got like a really solid investigation and solid people behind it, you're going to have a solid podcast. It sounds great. And by the way, I will say, in addition to what it sounds like, you really ought to go take a look at their multimedia platform and all this artwork that they did for it. Just check it out on YouTube if you need to. It was a great package all put together.
This was number 3 on my list. And Kevin, I'm going to reiterate something you said. Real journalists making good sounding podcasts. This podcast was obviously crafted and edited and, shaped by people who know audio. And of course, I love a story that is full of Boston accents. I love it, love it, love it. I'm a sucker. And I'm a sucker for story with dirty cops, too. Dirty cops and Boston accents, man, I can't get enough of them in podcasts. So yeah, I'm number 3 with Spotlight Snitch City. Toby, can you please reveal your number 1 podcast we reviewed in 2025?
We're taking a trip to Bone Valley. Season 3.
She had no law enforcement training, and she'd never even met Jessica Curran. But whatever grabbed her wouldn't let go.
Somebody had to do something. And if somebody was me, so be it.
Yeah, so, obviously Bone Valley is a prestigious brand, and Maggie Freeling is hosting season 3. This is kind of a multi-layered affair. It looks at a particularly vicious murder and the conviction of a man named Quincy Cross, largely because of the work of a citizen sleuth and a British journalist. It sounds like a great story. This citizen sleuth, nailing this horrible murderer, but did they actually get the right guy? So it's got a lot of the stuff that we like in podcasts. It's really well reported. Maggie is a great host. She's very empathetic. She's a very good writer, obviously a storyteller. I also, it just touched on a lot of stuff that just kind of comes up on CWO, but she does it in a very smart and kind of responsible way and lets the story kind of do it for her. It touches on false convictions and the difficulty of getting those rectified. The confusing and confused motives of investigators, whether they're officials or whether they're citizen detective types, the power of narratives, both in sort of solving a crime, but also in selling the solution that you've kind of come up with. And I think that's particularly important here, that there's sort of this meta narrative that helps sell people on this guy Quincy's conviction, which is the story of this woman who kind of figured it out in the town, but except she didn't really figure it out. But you don't get hit over the head with these themes. They're part and parcel of the story. Maggie is a very, she's sort of top of the game. So for all those reasons, that was my favorite number one podcast of the year.
Lara Bricker, this was your number 10.
Yeah, so I think, anything Maggie Freeling does, I was just revisiting her earlier Maura Murray documentary. I was writing a magazine article, and I just love her reporting style. I love the way that she goes out and digs into it. And I think that this particular story, the way that it unfolded was kind of something that I was like, how did this even happen? So this was why it was on my list.
Yeah, this was number 2 on my list. I loved this podcast, and the more it's one of those ones also that's like a thinker. I think about it all the time. So what I loved about it was it sort of showed like white women who mean well syndrome. There's 2 of them in the story too, which is what makes it so incredible. There's like the one who got the guy wrongfully convicted, and then there's the one in the present day who's, working to get him out. Like, it's so interesting. And I love that Maggie doesn't shy away from naming that. Without making the audience feel like if they're interested in cases and they get involved, or if they're in Facebook groups or whatever, without making them feel like, shame around it. She's just talking about it. And she's just great. She's dark. She's funny. She's great with people in the field, and you can hear it. Yeah, this was my number 2. Kevin, this was your number 8.
Yeah, Maggie Freeling, we said before, she's like 3'7". 85% of that is tattoos. It's 100% badass.
Yes.
One of the great parts of the podcast too, and this isn't all about Maggie, but one of the things that I'll remember is her own transparency, her own willingness to be vulnerable about whether or not she's doing the right thing, and be completely honest about that. We don't get that a lot. This is a really interesting story because there's also a huge oh shit moment in it, which is that not only do you find out this gadfly is probably peddling the wrong information, but you hear the motive why, and it blew my fucking mind. Anyway, that's why, like, on my list, Bone Valley Season 3, Graves County, that's number 8. It's definitely top 10 any year.
We have to, of course, point out that all 4 of us had that on our lists, as we all do. My number 1 podcast of the year, which is Wisecrack.
I'm going to tell you a story, right? And it's going to be one story all the way through. And there's a few things I need you to know about this story before we kick off. It's true. Everything I'm going to tell you is completely true.
It has been years since I have recommended people listen to a podcast as often as I have recommended people listen to Wisecrack. And these aren't just people who like true crime. This is like everybody I know who listens to podcasts. I'm like, you have to listen to this show. You have to, at the very minimum, listen to episodes 1 and 2 and then the final episode. It is so well done. It is so interesting, and it is unlike anything I've heard before. I think the last time I was this excited about a podcast not sounding like anything I've heard before is when we did You Didn't See Nothing, and that also ended up, I think, as number 1 on my list that year. So this is about Ed Hodges. He's a British comedian, and he performed at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival a long time ago, years and years ago, and his set was caught by a TV producer named Jodie Tovey, who I believe was only there because it was raining, something like that. Anyway, the first 2 episodes of this podcast are the set. It's him doing the set, probably in a different venue, doesn't matter. It's him doing the set, him telling the story, which is a story of 2 murders that happened next door to his parents' house where he happened to be at the time. And it is compelling, and it is terrifying, and it is also deeply, deeply funny. And then there's a whole middle section of the podcast, which is an exploration by Jodie about the truth of the story, just trying to find out more about it, like, the details and so forth. And then she starts questioning Ed's veracity himself, which is a really interesting little moment. But anyway, this podcast is awesome. It's funny. Like I said, it's scary. And I'm a sucker for something that's unlike anything I've ever heard before.
Wisecrack is my number 1 podcast for 2025. Yeah, there are investigations that went deeper. There were journalists that are more hardcore and more hard-scrabbled. There are crimes that are more gruesome or more compelling, but you will not hear a better storyteller than Ed. If you listen to only one thing, listen to these first 2 episodes. Because once you do that, you're going to go through and listen to the rest. It's unique. You're right, Rebecca. It does kind of remind me of like the life stories and things like You Didn't See Nothing. And it makes you almost wish that Ed had more horrible stories in his background because he was just so good at telling it. Unlike anything that we've heard. And that's why it deserves to be at the top of my list here.
Yeah.
And now, Lara, I'm going to pass it to you because this was number 6 on your list.
Yeah, I echo everything. I think why this was on my list is like, this was like nothing we've ever heard. Those first 2 episodes of this podcast, I could not stop listening to.
Mm-hmm.
I was mesmerized by his story. And then I was mesmerized by the examination of, did he just make this up because it makes for a good comedic routine? And then coming around full circle to then he goes off and he doesn't want to talk to her anymore. And then he comes back. It was just so interesting and so unlike anything else that we have listened to. And it was one of those podcasts, the first time in a long time that I kept listening, or I would sit in the car to finish an episode.
Toby Ball, this is number 7 on your list.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add. The first couple episodes are just super compelling. And, you know, the only thing we haven't really talked about is, I think the question that kind of comes up in it is like, do you fact check comic routines? Basically, you know, it's sort of like the quest that she sets out on is sort of interesting in and of itself. It's quite different and deserves all the accolades, certainly.
I think we can, the 4 of us can agree that we were sucked in.
Yes.
Yes. I would love to hear somebody say, I wasn't sucked in by the first 2 and give me a reason why that was the case. Because I just, you know, if you listen to podcasts, it's just genuinely sort of genius.
Yeah, it's very special.
The fact that they're willing to just let it flow, you know, there's no need to like interject the host. It's just egoless. Let this guy talk. It was great.
And parts of it that's funny too.
I would just say,
you forget the other parts of the routine about his childhood. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say we've got very good taste, Kevin, because I have looked at several best of lists so far this year, and Wisecrack tops many of them, including Apple Podcasts, top podcasts of the year. So yeah, congratulations to the folks at Tenderfoot. We need to give them a little acknowledgement here. Donald, you did good on this one. I loved Wisecrack. All right, remember, you can find our weighted combined top 10 list on our website, crimewriterson.com. You can also take a look in the show notes there to see what ended up being our final top 10 once they're all weighted and measured together. But that is going to do it for us. Lara Bricker, if folks want to reach out to you and congratulate you on your great podcast taste, how can they find you online?
You can find me at Lara Bricker on Instagram and Blue Sky.
What about you, Toby Ball? You're like shifted a few hours, but if folks want to communicate with you 6 hours from the past, how can they find you online?
Not sure how that works.
Or the future? Yeah.
Or the future, the past, whatever. I'm always there at TobyBallNH on Blue Sky, at TobyBall603 on Instagram. Rip Current is still coming out. I think episode 6 is dropping this week. So if you haven't checked it out, you owe it to yourself and your children to listen.
Kevin Flynn, how can you be found?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
All right. You can follow me everywhere at Reb Lavoie, X, Blue Sky, and Instagram. Please join our amazing community in our official Crime Writers On Facebook group. It's awesome. And if you see our stuff on Instagram or you see our stuff on TikTok, please engage with it. Like it, star it, share it, whatever. Those engagements really, really help people notice our show. You can get everything we make at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia. Lots and lots of episodes back there. Our theme song was composed and performed by Tyler Gibbons, and our editor is the terrific Livy Burdett. The EP of this show is Kevin. This show was recorded in the Caitlin Rogers Project Studio, also known as Studio C, the closet in our New Hampshire basement, where we also refuse to answer that loud knocking on the door in the middle of the night.
Bullshit.
On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
Toby, I am listening to the audiobook of Say Nothing, and today, I swear to God, I just got to Freddie Scapitici today, and I heard it while I was snow blowing in my driveway, which you don't have to do in Spain.
No.
So kiss my ass.
Yeah, I just have to pick oranges off the orange trees. Walk by.
Oh my God.
Or as Stakeknife might say, Pug Mahone. All right, good.
Partners in Crime Media.
Hey everybody, Ted Danson here to tell you about my podcast with my longtime friend and sometimes co-host Woody Harrelson. It's called Where Everybody Knows Your Name, and we're back for another season. I'm so excited to be joined this season by friends like John Mulaney, David Spade, Sarah Silverman, Ed Helms, and many more. You don't want to miss it. Listen to Where Everybody Knows Your Name with me, Ted Danson, and Woody Harrelson sometimes, wherever you get your podcasts.